too shabby, am I right?
Hello everyone and welcome to another MN Gaming review. Today we're going to be reviewing the Western release of Tower of Fantasy, a free-to-play gacha game that has drawn some comparisons to other games like Genshin Impact and Honkai Impact. It's definitely the new kid on the block, so let's take a look to see what this new kid has to offer. I came into this game not knowing what to expect from the story. A part of me thought, there's no way a free-to-play game could actually have a story that was interesting enough to hook the average person, while the other part of me thought, you never know, right? And I fall kind of in the middle now. The story started out super basic with a lot of anime tropes being used and a lot of very cliche RPG kind of stuff going on. You know, go there, pick up an item, give it to that person, go there, kill a bunch of enemies, and then go here. It was kind of like busy work, right? But then I started doing some of the character-specific stories. And while I didn't super love every single one of them, I did find enough enjoyable content there to get me interested. It raised up questions and brought up themes in the story that I wasn't expecting to see at all. Some really interesting sci-fi stuff. Now, I don't really want to spoil too much on it, but let's just say that if you were playing this game for the story, well, you wouldn't have the worst experience in the world. Now let's talk about visuals. The visuals of this game. To talk about this is a little complicated, so let's break it down. One of the first things that I want to mention about the visuals is the art style, right? So this is one of those games where you get to design your own main character. So that was actually one of the things that really drew me to the game. I thought, hey, it would be really fun to make like an anime avatar of myself, right? First of all, I found the initial pool of cosmetics to mold your character with to be super limited. It felt like we were basically just making variations of the same couple of characters. Despite the fact that there were color shaders for most of this stuff, I felt like there just wasn't enough variety there initially to really blow my mind. That being said, as I went exploring through the game world and found various exploration-based rewards, I found myself slowly completing map percentage, right? And it seems that there is some sort of reward for completing each area of the map up to 85%. And they're all interesting looking outfits. In terms of character design for the NPC characters, especially the kind of characters that you would be trying to get from the game, I would say it comes down to personal preference. A lot of them have somewhat distinct characteristics to differentiate between each other. And they also, of course, have alternate costumes that you can mess around with. Now, another aspect of the game is the game world. Now, this is supposed to be some kind of alien world. And honestly, if I didn't know that, I would probably think this was just Earth in the future. This planet is called Ida, apparently, and despite this, the grass is green, the rocks are brown, the water's blue, and I don't quite know how I feel about that. A part of me thinks after games like No Man's Sky and movies like Star Wars and stuff that we've seen enough weird space stuff to just be able to accept like a purple sky and yellow grass or something like that, right? But the fact that everything just looks so Earth-like, maybe it's not a big deal for the average player, but to me, when you promised me an alien world, I kinda expect a few things, you know? And honestly, this is the least alien world I've seen in a while. And that is not to say that the world is ugly or anything. It has its certain amount of charm, you know. We're still in the era where a lot of games are trying to emulate that almost watercolor-like style for the environments that Breath of the Wild popularized. And this game, well, it's trying its best, isn't it? Well, I guess it's trying its best. Aside from issues with the art design, one thing that I enjoyed about the visuals of the game was the fact that you can actually pop on a few filters on how everything looks. And you know what? Maybe this is like the most ordinary feature of all. I know that there are a lot of mods that do this, especially to games like Final Fantasy XIV. But I just found the option to basically apply an Instagram filter onto my game that just works all the time to be kind of cool. It helped me pick a version of the world where the colors looked just right to me, and I appreciate that. In terms of pure visuals, I must say that the game looks more than decent. However, the performance is another issue entirely. Now, when I was playing on mobile, this was not very common for me, but I have read reports of a lot of visual glitches being experienced by certain players, along with drops in frame rates as well, and this is on PC, right? But then again, it is still early days of the game, so we have to see how the developers respond to these. Overall, I would say that the visuals were above average in terms of quality, but it's just that they're not to my taste. But I think that doesn't diminish from their overall quality. And so, it's all right. Music and video games have come a long way since when you could just slap on 30 seconds of a looping melody and call it a day. We've had exceptional works of music that have been composed for various video games. Some of them sound like classical music, some of them sound like entirely new genres, to be honest with you. So how did the music of Tower of Fantasy impact me? Well, very little. Now, I'm not saying this music is terrible. That I want to be clear about. I just think it is also not exceptional. It is not bad enough to be offensive, but not good enough to be memorable. It feels like it's really middle of the road, just serviceable stuff. Calm music when you're in a town or just exploring in the field. A little bit of more of an upbeat music that plays in the music, but these things kind of just drone on and on and on for so long that they kind of become like noise, at least to me. I was playing the game continuously for more than a few hours per day when it first came out, and during that time, I cannot remember a single piece of music that stood out to me so much that I would actually go back and revisit it. In fact, researching some of this music for this review left me with a weird feeling where it was like, wait, this music was playing where? Has it been playing this entire time? Oh my god. That was the experience I had with all the songs that I checked out later. It just felt like they never really stood out. But that, I guess, just makes things even more disappointing. So to wrap things up, the sound or the music of Tower of Fantasy is inoffensively unnoticeable. That's how I would put it. Now, let's talk about the big one, the gameplay. This is one of the areas that might actually attract a lot of players to Tower Fantasy, and this is actually one of the ways the game got its hooks into me in the beginning. Unlike some of the other gacha games out there, this game is more based around the idea of finding weapons that belong to characters rather than the characters themselves. In fact, the world is set up in such a way that when a person picks up a weapon, they can also download information on how to use it into their brain, and this information is based on combat data from some of the experts that use in the weapon, and that's what it is when you switch from one character to the other. You're basically switching from combat data to combat data. Now, some people like myself really like our character's visuals, so we keep our character the way they are and we just switch out the weapons. But other people really love the pre-designed characters, so they have the option of having character skins on. At the level of play that I was at, these skins didn't really come into play in a major way mechanically. But I expect that once we get to end game grinding and all these kind of things, that the various incremental differences these skins make will end up being significant to some of the more heavily invested players. Now, each of these weapons comes with its own moveset and its own special moves and such, and another interesting aspect of this is that when you attack with one weapon, you see that the other weapons are kind of charging up, and when it's charged up fully, you can switch weapons to unleash what is known as a discharge attack. It's kind of like an ult from another gacha game, but I don't think you get invincibility frames for this one. Either way, these things do look really cool in an anime sort of way, but I mean, that's the audience, right? And some of them really hit hard too. Now, leaving combat aside, one last piece that makes all of this work in a really cool way is the fact that apparently, if you can time your dodges quite right, you set off what is essentially a slow-mo mechanic, where some area around the enemy in a sort of hemisphere will be slowed down in time. So this allows you to get more attacks off on them, or perhaps switch to another weapon, do a cool move, you know, a bunch of stuff. And that makes the gameplay, at least on the surface, seem like it's super engaging and dynamic. And I've seen some people draw a few surface level comparisons to games like Devil May Cry. I am here to tell you that all of this is held together by seemingly rubber bands and duct tape. Because the Bayonetta witch time thing, the time slowdown thing that happens when you dodge, yeah, good luck consistently pulling that off. Because sometimes it just works, and sometimes you totally dodge but get hit anyway.
No, he's got a point.
Like the hitboxes, at least in the experience of myself and some of the other people that I talked to about this, were lousy. So it's not really made in such a way where you can fully take advantage of this system. Now, another aspect of this is that these weapons, especially the cooler ones, are of course hidden behind gacha. Now, if you are one of those lucky people and you end up getting exactly what you want, you could end up having a really lovely gameplay experience where you have weapons that really suit your playstyle, and they look cool, and they do really nice amounts of damage as well, so upgrading them is a worthwhile endeavor. But on the other hand, if you don't get any of these things, if you constantly struggle and you have a really hard time, maybe the game is not going to be so fun for you from a gameplay side. But that is the combat. Now, another topic that warrants discussion is the gameplay during exploration. Exploration is a big part of this game, not gonna lie. Whether it is finding interesting abilities that make the overworld more traversable, or whether you find all of those hidden purple orb things to do wishes with, or if you're just going for that map percentage, running, swimming, surfing, gliding, jumping, climbing, it's all here, you know? Ever since Breath of the Wild, a lot of these kind of games just take that basic set of abilities and just put their own little tweaks on it and give it to you, saying, here you go. And this game is not that much different. The only problem is that a lot of these tech can be a little inconsistent and janky. Now, in the early days of the game, a few of my friends were telling me about this infinite stamina glitch that they had to rely on to scale some of the taller mountains and to get that full map percentage. There's also a little problem with detecting what can be climbed and what can't, along with just some jank when it comes to switching from surface to surface or grabbing something as you're falling. There's a lot of little things in there that feel like bugs that should be squashed out over time, but I suppose we will see, won't we? Now, I've talked a lot about gameplay in this segment, so let me just cap it off by saying that on a moment-to-moment basis, playing this game does actually feel pretty good. You have cool weapons with cool attack animations and the ability to switch from one to the other while unleashing a devastating attack. It has a certain appeal to it, you know? Especially if you have like a bunch of really fast weapons and really strong weapons and stuff all paired up together, so you can keep switching based on your own utility, and it feels pretty good. That being said, the amount of bugs and jankiness that is lying just underneath the skin of this game is worrying. Right now, it's not enough to just ruin the experience, but unless they fix these things soon, unless they make the dodge more reliable, unless they make the hitboxes more accurate, this might not be as rewarding in the long term as initially hoped. So overall, The gameplay is good, but there are several important things that they do wrong that prevent it from being great. Ah yes, the gacha system. We are finally here, aren't we? Let's talk about that thing that hangs over this game like a giant dark cloud. Surprisingly, I don't actually have a lot of negative things to say about it. In fact, one of the things that I noticed about the gacha system is that the pity works a little differently in this one from other games such as Genshin Impact, right? In those games, you would find that while you're rolling, the pity will keep increasing, but if you get a character of a higher level, even if it's not the one that you necessarily want, it will reset. In this one, it doesn't seem to reset. Well, at least in one of the banners. There are 3, by the way. Did you know that? Yeah, this game has 3 banners for you to roll on. Actually, no, I think it has 4. Wait, does it have more? There's a lot of stuff to roll on. Okay, I should have mentioned this in the gameplay part, but there's a lot of menus in this game. Oh my god, it's like menu the game. Anyway, yeah, so there are like 3, 4 different kinds of gacha that you can roll on. Some of them for characters / weapons, and others for what are called matrices, which seem to be some sort of plug-in upgrade that gives stat buffs or certain abilities to characters, like an increasing chance to crit or something like that. Now, I was able to get the 2 or 3 characters that I found really appealing and used their weapons through my playthrough. I actually had a pretty decent time. But the thing is, that was only after I got what I wanted. If my luck had been bad with the gacha system and I didn't manage to get what I want, what I'd be left with is a game of increasing levels of FOMO, or fear of missing out, and frustration, while I watched other people basically do all the things I wished I could do, but couldn't because of some random number generator. Now, I know this is the risk of almost all gacha games, right? But what I'm saying is that without that satisfying win, a lot of this can feel tedious or grindy, or like it's just making you wait for things that you should be able to do. So what am I saying with all this? What I'm saying is that the gacha system is a little bit more forgiving than I expected, especially compared to some of the other popular gacha games out there. And that was kind of nice. Getting what you want and feeling that satisfying feeling as your brain goes brrr, that's pretty nice. But you always gotta remember that there is a non-0% chance that you won't get what you want. And you'll just be working hard in this game world like you're doing a part-time job, just annoyed, waiting for the fun to begin. So let's wrap this up. Overall, Tower of Fantasy was, to me, an okay game. It had an above-average story. It had decent visuals, but nothing too visually spectacular. I'm still salty about the alien world thing, but we'll let that go. It has the okayest soundtrack that I've heard in a good long while. The gameplay is fun, but it has enough jank in it to make me feel like it's not quite polished. As for the gacha system, it's actually surprisingly not that harsh yet. So would I recommend this game to you all? Well, that leads us to our next segment. With most of our reviews, we don't have a segment like this, but I feel like for this game, especially since real money could be involved, y'all need to know. Let's talk about the developer of this game, Hota Studio. They are a Chinese-based company and have caused some amount of controversy in China with the Chinese version of Tower of Fantasy. And the reason why I'm telling you all these stories is because I feel like real money could be at stake here if you decide to invest in this game, and the only responsible thing to do is to inform you so you can make your own informed decision. Now, the story of this studio and its shenanigans begin with one of the earliest trailers of this game. At the time, it was observed that one of the characters in the trailer was actually holding what appears to be an item from Honkai Impact 3rd, another very popular gacha game. This caused a little bit of controversy, and the studio basically removed the item from the video and re-uploaded it. So no harm done, I guess. And it also issued an apology. Now, in this apology, of course, they said that they wouldn't do it again. And wouldn't you know it, they did it again. Just 2 months later after this, you have this trailer that promotes the game, that stars the character of Shirley, who is one of the early NPCs that you meet in the game. And I kid you not, this video is almost a shot-for-shot remake of another video created by an indie creator. The comparisons are mind-blowing. This is the exact opposite of copy my homework and change a few things so it looks legit. This is just the copy my homework part. Now, that is issues of plagiarism, and it also shows the developers not properly responding to those issues. Now, that doesn't have a lot to do with the game. So let's talk about stuff that does have a lot to do with the game. Item duplication, hacking, a lot of glitches and bugs. No way to properly communicate this with the developers of the game, at least in the early couple of weeks. So let's elaborate. Item duplication and these kind of hacks are very common in gacha games, especially during the early days, and it is up to the developers to squash out these things so that it doesn't mess up the economy of the game. However, when Tower of Fantasy first dealt with this issue, it was back when it was still a China-only game. At the time, there was a strange item duplication glitch that allowed the free-to-play players to basically get whatever they wanted, which disincentivized the more hardcore paying players to spend any more on the game. And that ended up causing a loss of revenue and a loss of player base for the game as well. Now, with its Western release, a lot of hope and expectation was put on the studio that it would address and fix some of these problems that arose during its earlier iteration of the game. After all, it is not every day that you get to make a first impression twice. But unfortunately, for the case of this studio, the Western release has been plagued with much of the same issues. And if their track record of how they dealt with it in China is any indication, we might not really be getting that substantial of a solution to these problems. Now, we will be keeping an eye on these issues to see how long it persists, but this is something you need to know if you are going to play this game. It is a free-to-play game, so there is no harm in trying it out, but there absolutely might be harm in investing financially into this game, no matter how cool you think the characters are or how interesting you find the story or whatever it is. My suggestion would be to give it a few months. Just see what the first couple of updates are like, to see whether they address any of the mechanical issues in the game, whether they address any of the gacha-related or glitch-based hacking-related issues of the game, and to see how they respond to fan critique. Because if you are going to be invested in a gacha game, and I mean that figuratively and literally, you gotta at least make sure that the developers are somewhat reliable to deliver the content that they promise. Otherwise, you might as well just be taking that money and burning it. Because if you spend a lot of money in this game to get a character that you really like, and 3 months later the game shuts down and you have nothing to show for it, nah. So no matter how cute you think a character is, or how cool their moveset is, or their weapon is, then try to have a little bit of patience and wait this thing out. The true colors of Tower of Fantasy will be revealed over time as the developers deal with increasingly elaborate problems. We will see whether they're up to the task of competing with other big games of a similar type. Now, all that being said, how do I rate this game? I would say, so far, for me, this is the world's okayest gacha game. It's not good enough to make me excited, and it's not bad enough to make me annoyed. It's just okay, average, middle of the road, kinda okay. So should you play this game? Only if it's free. And that is our review of Tower of Fantasy. Thank you for listening, and we would love to hear what you thought about the games, so feel free to share them in the comment section below. Once again, thank you for tuning in, and we will see you in the next one.